Fiola is from the JSE, and Tumelo is what he calls himself a chief township entrepreneur, which is great. We talk about nation building and the AV that we just saw now. I played in Angola last week when I spoke to them about nation branding. And we ended a 4-hour workshop with that very same video. And the one thing that stood out about it is they said, we are so proudly to be South African. And I think really it's really that. It's when you look at imagery, when you look at content that talks about South Africa, we cannot alienate ourselves, whether we are black, white, Indian colored in a country that is so diverse. So I think we all sit here as proudly South Africans. The thing about nation building is the basis on which to ensure that the country takes up an effective role within the world community. And I think a brand like Brand South Africa does exactly that. And some of the notes that I picked up is that Brand South Africa is the official marketing agency of the country. And really it is to build the brand reputation and the image of the country in order to improve its global competitiveness. And really its vision is to inspire its people that is admired globally. And if we look at what the Boks are doing for us, what the Proteas are doing for us, it is what sport is doing for us as a country. So nobody better than to actually talk about what nation branding is than one of the experts of it, as Stembile. Stembile, we've come out of COVID. We're one of the countries that have a distinguished difference between destination branding and nation branding. And I think our audience needs to know what is that difference.
Thanks, Katie. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Simply put, I say to people, one agency plays in the space of influencing and changing perception, and that's Brand South Africa, because we influence the narrative, we influence how the world sees South Africa. And then the other agencies play in the space where we call the demand creation. It's transactional, so it's sector focused. So meaning, for instance, the South African tourism, you are able to gauge how many visitors came from the African continent, from US. And when we juxtapose that with the nation brand, I cannot tell you conversion rate per rand, but it's equally important because a country can be so popular for anything else, tourism, but there's more to countries than just one sector. And I'd like to believe that the two can work together, complementary. But what matters most is what builds reputation. Reputation is what people associate a country with before they could even convert into making a transaction, whether I want to invest in South Africa or I want to visit. So it's important we are in that space, and often I hope our government people are here. They ask us rand for rand, what have you brought in? And I look at you and I said, well, perhaps we need to take you onto a masterclass to really understand the fundamental differences. They complement each other. One cannot live without the other, but they are equally important.
And I think what we need to do is to learn from other countries that have an economic advantage. Because if you look at COVID, some of the countries relied on their tourism.
Absolutely.
And we need to learn from the countries that have that economic basket as an advantage for South Africa to leverage off its nation brand.
Absolutely, Katie. One of the wonderful competitive advantages that we have as a country is that we have a diversified economy. Our story is not only told, looking at one way, school of thinking, or, agriculture or mining. We have diversified our economy so much that the story is just, it's so great and it's so huge, and it's for every one of us to be a messenger. Well, if you call yourself South African and you are a proud South African, I always challenge people to be messengers, because Tanzania, post-COVID, let me share one insight, real example. Tanzania came to Brand South Africa and said, for the longest time we've been positioning ourselves and restricted ourselves as a country of Tanzania through tourism. So how do we diversify? How do we mix the baskets? And my answer was simple. Positioning has to, by and large, be informed by vision. Every strategy has to have a vision. So where do you want to see yourself as a country in the next 10 years? if we could not tour, and funny enough, Tanzania people could still travel, by the way, during COVID, because they never had any cases. But be that as it may, it was a wake-up call for that destination to diversify their messages and actually start to compile a positioning that is not restrictive, but a positioning that can take them to their vision 2030 or 2060.
Well, interesting point you made there with how do we do this and who are the stakeholders that we use. And Cleola, the JSE is, of course, one of the most recognized stock exchanges in the world. And you're also one of Brand South Africa's very prominent stakeholder. Although we appreciate the contribution of the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, you drive the excellence.
Are our culture. The intangibles are how we, speak about our country, our narratives, right? The people, our heritage, trust, vision, whether we are a great marketplace. Do people see us as a place for growth? So there's so many factors that come into play when it comes to competing. And if we are serious about saying that, for us to grow, SMEs are critical, we need to get serious about how we amplify our companies, how we cohesively come together as an ecosystem and basically go out there and compete.
I think, Tumelelo, on that one, you've just come back from winning an award at Advertising Week in New York. What do you think that SMMEs and the youth in particular can learn from global brands or other SMMEs around the world?
Katie, first of all, I want to just give a shout out to Stembile and the Brand South African team. The work they've done and the work they continue to do is very visible globally as we travel. First of all, I just want to give a few nuggets that I took from Ads Week in the last week. One, female is future. And I think that has been seen in the country. Before I left, First Rand made a massive announcement of Mary Villagas. That shows where we're moving as a country, as a brand. And globally, that is what is key, is female is future.
Female is future, lead like women.
And that for me is extremely competitive. Secondly is scared money does not grow. So scared money does not grow. It's lesson number 2 that I learned. You see the impact of what MTN has done with MasterCard. It's a massive acquisition. Great view of how then to expand into financial inclusion, one not only in the country but in the continent. It's saying we are here not only for Brand South Africa, but as Brand South Africa, we are a champion of Brand Africa. And MTN's work with MasterCard has shown that. And then point number 3 that I learned from there that I saw is creativity in South Africa is massive. We had a day and a half and a night of taking Amapiano to the world. I give a shout out to my friend Umusito Ramile. Umusito is a big brand ambassador of South Africa. He was able to take New York, Brooklyn, the Bronx, and said, we are here and we are here as Amapiano and we're bringing Amapiano to the world. So as a country, we're doing well. Creativity, investments, financial services, telecoms, we will soon be the king of the world. But lastly, what I've learned as a key element is, as brands, if you're not on TikTok, you're tracking behind. Gone are the days where TikTok is just for mojolo, for dancing. Global brands are competing on TikTok. If you aren't obsessed about your followership on TikTok and moving your brand from out of home to out of phone, how are you engaging customers out of phone? Whether it's from restaurants, gas stations, out there at the airport, as brands, let's start being obsessed about your out-of-phone marketing strategy. And as Brand South Africa, we're saying we're here for business, we're here to go out there in the world to make things happen.
So that talks about the competitiveness and how do we leverage off what we own as a brand to be competing against other countries, because we do, especially in Africa.
Look, I mean, I think we have to wear a hat that fully understands the dynamics of building a brand and what it means to build a brand. That is why Simon Anholt, who coined the term nation branding, had in mind that governments all over the world must adopt the mentality of being brand custodians. Because once you've done that, you set the scene and the tone of what your country is all about, in terms of positioning, of vision. And then you are able to draw insights in terms of your competitive strength. I mean, you've alluded to them, the financial services. I mean, we house the top 20 JSE in the world. That is one of the driving things and sound bites or nuggets, as we call them in marketing, reasons to believe in South Africa. If the nation brand is about changing perceptions in 6, because we use a framework that was developed by Simon Anholt, which is a hexagon, and it looks at issues of governance. Governance is equally important because it can enable or disable how investors want to invest in a country. So the effectiveness, the transparency of government is important. That is why that also impacts on the perceptions. So what story are we telling as Brand South Africa? Do we look at those governance indexes? Do we analyze the rule of law and understand its implications when we are compromised as a country? And it goes on to the culture and heritage. You spoke about that, Viola. That's our competitiveness, and we really do well if I look on the soft power, which is an index that was also coined by Joseph Nye. It speaks to the ability to trade and make investments using soft power instead of the hard power, which was, the ancient way. And that's where we really thrive, our culture, our heritage. And for me, positioning is about striking the right balance. Where you're doing well and you've entrenched your positioning. And I think we've done that as the country. You need to now pull levers to convert the existing perceptions. And currently, we've been synonymous with mining sector, with manufacturing, and we are trying to change that and reverse that by talking about our services, by talking about the not so told story in terms of how we perform, our role of peace, that we play in the global country index. We are also ranked very good for the role of international peace and security. If you look at the gift of the givers and the role that they play in that pillar specifically under that the good country index, it tells you that there's a little bit of Mandela, there's a little bit of talent in South Africa. What we suffer from is fragmented approach in how we project ourselves. I say fragmentation because we've seen it. There's a crisis, then we've got mouthpiece and different messages. So what are we saying? So I think there's a whole lot more that, and we as Brand South Africa try a lot together with our parent company, GCIS, where we work towards integrating the government so that the left hand understands what the right hand is doing. Because it doesn't do great for the country. We had looting. How many voices did we have in terms of really weren't we ready? We were just, frankly, we were mediocre. And we have to stop. And I think it has to start at the top. And the top must understand, when I say top, our leaders, we are in the leadership conference, and they also understand the role that they play in their respective portfolios and how that role impacts on the reputation of the country. So which means if we are to adopt the theory of change as leaders, we ought to be fully accountable for impact-based performance, because that is what will make us become a de facto leader, as we are, truly, as you said. I mean, the continent looks at us. You went to Angola. They learn from us. I don't know how many country brands they've come to us. Some of them are giving us a hiding. Not so long ago, we sat with Brand Rwanda. Now they are remarkable, more than us. Even us, quote, us South Africans, we quote Rwanda more than we believe in ourselves. But here you have an entity, you have an agency that has been tasked by doing so much great work. And the reason possibly you don't understand that this entity, or you are aware that this entity exists, it's because the financial muscle to have a huge voice is not there. But what we try through these engagements is to have a voice, because we believe that when we've touched the heart of somebody who shares the same vision that we have, that of building a South Africa or a nation brand that inspires its people and is admired globally, we are then able to win. And that's the strategy we will then employ as well in the continent, because we do have those ties, and we have the African Continental Free Trade Area. But it will fail dismally if we don't deal with the gist of issues around immigration, for instance, the visa regime. So there's a lot of reflection that we need to do as a country brand, but we will get the seamless execution of the strategy when there's an integration in how we do things.
Yeah. I mean, the big challenge is when other African countries would like to host a convention in South Africa, the biggest challenge that they have is the visas. So you can host something, which means there'll be investment in South Africa. Visas are not getting on time, and that is something that we can't control, and it's something that you committed to take on further as well. Stemile spoke about the alliance with the JSE. What do you think that the future would look like? Because we have a lot of country of origin brands that sit on the top 20, like the Woolworths, the Discoveries, the Capitec brand. What do you think the future would look like if we can work effectively together with corporate South Africa?
I think the pertinent point in terms of what the future would look like is what do we invest in, right? If you take and you use the example, and I mean a few people spoke about how excited everybody is about the sports and we're doing so well in terms of the World Cup. Take that as a simple case study and case in point. We're doing well. You can see tangibly social cohesion coming from that, which has an economic impact, right? Out of that, there's so many spin-offs, right? But post that, let's say we win the World Cup, touch wood, and what happens after that? What are we investing in for the next World Cup, right? Do we have a strategy for sports investment? Do we have an investment strategy for infrastructure, for school level sports across the country? Do we understand the impact of what we actually have? So if you don't understand what your strategy is, you're not clear about what the future is going to look like, right? If you look at 2050, and we are already looking at 2050, right? China is going to be the biggest economy in the world, right? South Africa is aiming at about $1 trillion. We have Tanzania, Ethiopia that are aiming for $3 trillion. You spoke about Rwanda. Rwanda's strategy is to steal the conferencing and venue capability and make sure that they are the number one choice for conferencing in Africa. Once upon a time, Cape Town was the number one choice. Why is Rwanda able to do that? Strategy. They have a clear, succinct strategy, and they invest in that strategy cohesively as an ecosystem to ensure that they're able to execute it and capitalize on it, right? Similarly, if you look at the airline, right? Ethiopia's away. We're not going to catch up. Where's SAA? Once upon a time, we were the best. So the question about what does public and private look like, or what does the future look like, will depend on what we invest in. So if we're clear about our strategy and our economic strategy, if we're clear about what, 3 years, 5 years, yes, then it's easier for the private sector to support that, right? Because then we can attract the right skills, we can work on the right innovation, we can invest in the right technology. We've got a 4IR strategy, which is, I'm not really sure what the 4IR strategy is. I've been part of the 4IR committees and things like that. But if you had to tangibly say one line, what is our 4IR strategy? You'd get 1,000,001 answers. So cohesive strategic investments is the only way we're going to be able to compete and have a strong brand that's going to ensure that we are competing effectively as a country.
I think now we have 5IR. And I think BRICS, hosting BRICS in South Africa actually showed the world that we can still, yes, we didn't have load shedding for that week, but it showed the world that we could really host something on and if we don't attend to it, we are going to be caught with our pants down, literally. We talked about corporates. Tumelo, township economy is one of the single other drivers of economy. So yes, a lot of the township economy is not focused on a global level, but how do you go out and ensure that they buy in this nation brand? Because I think a lot of the youth are quite disappointed, whether it's leaders, whether it's corporates. How do you go, how impactful is it when you go out there and get them to believe in a nation brand that will help them?
I think before we even look at where the money or how we can do that, I think the first thing we should do is, as corporates, we should be more patriotic. Stembile must be inundated with options for us to be able to partner, because partnership equity is very key. So you hold the money, she needs the money. As you partner, we are able to then become competitive and go out there and make a difference. So that for me is the first call. Before we even look at solutions, how do we resource Brand South Africa to be able to go out there and make a big difference? And big corporate, that is your job, our job, to make sure that is done. That's the first thing. Because if you go out there globally, big companies are being patriotic to their nations and becoming a massive tool in actually amplifying the brand of the country. One, Ireland as well. If you look at how Ireland is growing and growing effectively, it's because of the investments that happen in that country and how those corporates are now beefing up Brand Ireland to get bigger. So corporates, it's our time, let's make it happen. Tembile, they'll come to you. That's one. Secondly, for us, I mean, as we were able to then, if you go to New York, Amapiano is massive. If you go to Brooklyn, to the streets, we say Amapiano is becoming as competitive as hip hop, which is 50 years old, and Amapiano is only a few years old. So the township has got great brains, great insights, people who can do awesome stuff. How do we nurture that? It is the ease of business of big corporate to partner with the small, seemingly small guys, but more agile guys in the township. So key again is partnership equity is what will help us to grow. We have what it takes to go out there and compete. Thirdly, I mean, I just give you a story, Katie, is that I met one of the guys, an ex-Nedbank guy, that left Nedbank, I think, 2021. He now heads strategy for Gavi, which is a massive vaccine organization. He has created the biggest measurement tool for Gavi in 34 countries. This man worked at Nedbank. So we have the talent, we have the skill to go out there, form township, form South Africa to create a difference. It's about us now as corporates to jump in and fund these and resource these elements.
And you play an important part in that, because corporate wouldn't know about these individuals if you don't go out and knock at the door. So you hold a huge responsibility, because I think that the challenge that we face with the township is that they don't have a seat at the table. And I think I applaud you, and that's why you're one of the Play Your Part ambassadors for doing that and saying, you know, how can I help? How can I help? And I think I sound like an F&B ad, but basically.
Correct, you're right.
But that's exactly what your job is. So thanks for that. Site, you know, women leaders are powerful and are so profound as agents of change. I think somebody spoke about that. As a women leader, how important it is to drive that mandate to ensure that we equally have a strong female economy in our country as part of the nation brand?
Firstly, Katie, I think we over-contextualize this women empowerment, and we are the big scammers and propeller of a narrative that says, you know, women oppress other women. That's not true. Sometimes we find that there is just one lady that has gone through, you know, a very bad day, because we are allowed to have those bad days, and then it becomes the narrative. So for me, I think in the style of leadership that I will basically turn things around, is that in the space that I occupy, I'm there because I'm passionate. And I think for every employee behind every brand or every business, you have to have a passionate person and a passionate team. Because from the personal touch, from the passion itself, then you get what you call. Put it there. So that's the passion I'm talking about. My hands are jumping and disrupting the mic. But essentially, I'm talking about the fact that if you have, you know, I'm a passionate leader. Leader has to set the scene and make sure that there's passion, and they articulate the vision, and make sure that there's the personal touch when you deal with your teams. And I think women do that a lot. I suppose because we are by default we are mothers. I mean, imagine if we were to love one child more than the other. So we tend to strike the right balance. And I think God created it lovely, because then when you have such women, no matter how evil they can be, or you know, as we have seen the women Devil Wears Prada type of movies, there's always a soft part. But we must just debunk the fact that we are now striking numbers. You know, we are putting Sembile because, you know what, she's the right color and she's female. No, we are putting Sembile because she's capable, and she has done that change. And I think that's what we need to change. just like in government, I promote. I mean,
Yeah.
I come from a private sector. I've worked for your Tiger Brands, your Unilevers. That's why some of the people I see here and I know because they've been my colleagues in the past. And when I joined Brand SA, I said, oh my gosh, what was I going? Then this TikTok, I asked myself. Because it was 2011, but I kid you not, 12 years later, I'm still there. I've grown up the ranks, but because I believe I met, or rather I was put in a place where I could find purpose and it resonates with who I am. And I think once you have that cocktail and you are able to make it have ripple effects amongst your team members, then you find that they don't mind going through the storms because they understand why. If you understand the purpose, and I think we are now needing more than ever purpose-led leadership that are not there because of a sense of entitlement or political allies and such. And it's good to have political allies because we need them, but at least be skilled, and also have the integrity because leadership needs integrity. I spoke about governance, and I think it's the African continent sickness sometimes, and it's a perception because we do have great people, great leaders, but we must demystify that and say the true story that bridges the reality and perception. And for me, as a leader, that's what I advocate for kids. I first ask, do you love your country? Even when we talk about such partnerships, because I don't want a
Negative.
one-stop shop type of a thing. No, I don't want that. I don't want short-lived relationships. I want eternity relationships. And those relationships happen when you share the same vision with the country. So I'm that type of a leader. If you come to Brand SA, you will find it. Even in the driver, it's the same pattern that comes alive. Because people must understand why they are there. It's called selfless serving. And that's the leadership we need. It's not about inward looking, but it's about how am I impacting the next person so that they are able to do the same to the next person. That's why we came with Play Your Part. It's precisely that. Because I believe in every person there's a potential. Give people chances and spaces and you'll see they'll drive.
I think it's important we talk about female leadership, but we also talk about feminine leadership because I think the men who are our allies equally can learn the empathy, the nurturing. So, feminine leadership is not just being female. I think we have a lot to teach our male allies as well. And when we talk about the JSE is led by women. It's part of a transformational, but they are delivering an exceptional performance in there. How does it feel like to be part of this transformation that makes the nation brand look so good?
Oh, it's amazing. I don't know if you know this, but it's the first time in, I think, over 10 years that we have a male chairman. We've had a female chairman for quite a number of years in Ku. Female CEO, this is our second female CEO. Over 60% of our executives are female. Over 60% of our company is female. We are the 19th largest stock exchange in the world, and we are majority female. So during the time of COVID, you can imagine the volatility in the market. And if for instance, you have 100,000 trades as fast as you blink, imagine that going to 800,000 trades as fast as you blink, right? A number of stock exchanges had to close their doors, had to close the markets. We remained not only open, we had zero downtime, zero losses, everything operating sleek, on point, on time. Now, if that's not an example of female leadership, I don't know what is, right?
Well done.
And I think the difference is that when you enter the doors of the JSE, you don't have to demonstrate that you're capable. You're assumed capable, right? At the door, what you have to do is impress. Right, so the benchmark is quite high because, our director of capital markets, one of the few directors in the world of capital markets is female, a young female, right, under the age of 50. In fact, under the age of 40. And when she became director, she wasn't even 40. So we're leading by example. And coming back to South Africa and what that looks like, UN Global Compact, our CEO was the chairman for the longest time. We led the policy changes globally. We led the money that came to South Africa. So we are leading by example. And that is the differentiator in terms of the feminist touch, I believe, but also working cohesively. We work with a lot of the companies in here. When we have SA Tomorrow, we work with the public sector, even in the SME space, and we understand the benefits in terms of cooperatively and collaboratively demonstrating growth, right? So definitely there is a place for female leadership, but also a place for collaboration, whether you're male, female, and making sure that that works for the country.
Okay, well, I can see that we're getting time's up here. So basically, as a nation brand, we've had some of the great assets, which is in Madiba. Our constitution is one of the best constitutions in the world. Sports is one of the best driver as nation building in the country. Our arts and culture, we've mentioned, we recognize from designers to artists around the world. Our flag was one of the most recognized flag in the world. I mean, these are just a few assets that we talk about when we talk about nation branding. So if we leave you here is that, what is the way forward as corporate South Africa, as civil society? How do we continue to eradicate poverty? How do we continue the efforts to reduce the inequality through the different measures that would result in improving our great nation brand? And how do we get to go from a good nation brand to a great nation brand? So thank you to the panelists here, and I hope that we added some kind of value in understanding what actually a nation brand is. Thank you.
TM Global Media, going beyond borders.